So in this session, we'll be dealing with the development of gastrointestinal tract. As a result of cephalocaudal and lateral foldings of embryo, a portion of endoderm derived from gastrulation is incorporated into the embryo to form primitive gut. The yolk sac and allantois will remain outside the embryo. In the cephalic and caudal parts, the primitive gut forms foregut and hindgut, which are blind ending. Whereas in the middle part, the midgut which is formed will still have a connection with the yolk sac through the vitelline duct. You can see here, this is the head fold, this is the tail fold, this is the foregut, this is the hindgut, and this is the midgut. This midgut is connected to the yolk sac through the vitelline duct. So entire development of gastrointestinal tract will be studied under following 5 headings. Pharyngeal part of foregut, which we are going to study as pharyngeal arches, which is already completed. It extends from oropharyngeal membrane to respiratory diverticulum. Then cordon to the respiratory diverticulum, the remaining part of the foregut, which extends from respiratory diverticulum to the origin of liver bud. So today in this particular session, we'll be studying this. So development of liver, pancreas, spleen, then gallbladder, all this as a separate session. Then development of midgut and hindgut as a separate session. So what is the midgut? Midgut extends from liver bud to the junction of right 2/3 and left 1/3 of the transverse colon. And the hindgut extends from the junction of right 2/3 and left 1/3 of the transverse colon to the cloacal membrane. So these are the lateral foldings. You can clearly see. So here there is no intraembryonic body cavity. But once the lateral foldings are completed along with the head fold and tail fold, you can see here, this is the intraembryonic body cavity, peritoneal cavity, which is being formed. This is the tube, gut tube. So molecular regulation. So this is mainly initiated by concentration gradient of retinoic acid. So if you see in the pharynx, there is little or no retinoic acid, and if you see in the colon, highest concentration of retinoic acid is there. So this retinoic acid will influence SOX2 to favor development of esophagus and stomach, PDX1 for development of duodenum, CDXC for development of small intestine, CDXA for large intestine and rectum. So this is mainly done by epithelial mesenchymal interaction, which is initiated by sonic head shock. And if you see in the caudal part of midgut and hindgut, this sonic head shock expression will initiate the expression of Hox genes in the mesoderm, which will regularize the formation of the distal part of midgut and the hindgut. You can see here different genes coding for different parts. Here also you can see sonic hedgehog inducing Hox genes, cascade of genes for developing the distal part of the midgut and the hindgut. So mesentery. So what happens here is, this is the entire gut tube extending from lower part of esophagus till the hindgut. There is a vast dorsal mesentery, whereas ventral mesentery is only present in relation to the lower part of esophagus, stomach, and proximal part of the duodenum. And if you observe here, the part of the mesentery connecting to the stomach, we call it as dorsal mesogastrium. The part of the mesentery ventral to the stomach, we call it as ventral mesogastrium. And if you observe properly, the ventral mesogastrium is divided into lesser omentum between stomach and liver, and falciform ligament between liver and anterabdominal wall or ventral wall. And you can see here, this is the celiac artery, which is the artery of the foregut. Here you can see, this is the mesentery proper, which suspends the jejunum and ileum. And you can also see the superior mesenteric artery, which is the artery of the midgut. So here you can see this is the inferior mesenteric artery, which is the artery of the hindgut. So if you see the dorsal mesentery, it extends from lower end of esophagus to the cloacal region of the hindgut, as I have shown in the diagram. The one which connects stomach is dorsal mesogastrium. The one which connects duodenum, dorsal mesoduodenum. Colon, dorsal mesocolon. And dorsal mesentery, which suspends jejunum and ileum. This is the mesentery proper. Ventral mesentery, present only in relation to terminal part of esophagus, stomach and upper part of duodenum, and is derived from septum transversum. So due to growth of liver, it will be divided into lesser omentum and falciform ligament, as I have shown in the diagram. So this is the ventral mesentery. So this is the liver, the part of ventral mesentery between stomach and liver, lesser omentum, between liver and ventral wall, falciform ligament. So esophagus. So when the embryo is approximately 4 weeks old, the respiratory diverticulum appears at the ventral wall of foregut. Then the tracheoesophageal septum partitions the diverticulum from the foregut. So foregut divides into a ventral portion, the respiratory primordium, and a dorsal portion, the esophagus. First, esophagus is short, but with descent of heart and lungs, lengthens rapidly. In upper 2/3, muscular part is supplied by vagus nerve, and it is striated. In lower 1/3, the muscular part is smooth, supplied by the splanchnic nerves. You can see here, this is the respiratory primordium and this is the esophagus. You can see this is the foregut and this is the respiratory diverticulum. You can see the tracheoesophageal septum. You can see the completely separated respiratory and esophagus and pharyngeal part of the gut tube. The most commonest abnormality which is formed is the tracheoesophageal fistula or the esophageal atresia, where you can see here the proximal blind end of the esophagus and the distal part connected to the trachea just above its bifurcation as tracheoesophageal fistula. So these 4 types are less common and this is the most common. So sometimes there might be esophageal stenosis. So usually in the lower third. Stomach. Again the stomach appears as fusiform dilatation in 4th week. Rotates 90° clockwise around its longitudinal axis, so that left side becomes anterior, right side becomes posterior. So left vagus nerve supplies anterior surface and right vagus supplies the posterior surface. So during this rotation, the original posterior wall grows faster and forms the greater curvature, whereas the anterior wall forms the lesser curvature. The cephalic and caudal ends of stomach, they lie in midline, but due to further growth, the stomach rotates around an anteroposterior axis. So the pyloric part moves to right and upwards, and the cephalic part or the cardiac portion moves left and slightly downwards. The stomach thus assumes its final position, so with the axis running from left to right, above downwards. So because the stomach is attached to the dorsal body wall by dorsal mesogastrium and to the ventral body wall by the ventral mesogastrium, its rotation and disproportionate growth alter the position of these mesenteries. So this is the fusiform dilatation. Then you can see the rotation. So this was the original anterior wall which is forming the lesser curvature. This was the posterior wall which is forming the greater curvature. This was the left side which became anterior and this was the right side which became posterior. So this is the final position. You can see the pylorus slightly to the right and cardiac to the left, and this will be the axis above left to below right. So rotation about the longitudinal axis pulls the dorsal mesogastrium to the left, so creating a space behind the stomach called the omental bursa. So this rotation also pulls the ventral mesogastrium to the right. So as this process continues during 5th week, Spleen primordium appears as a mesodermal proliferation between the two leaves of the dorsal mesogastrium, and the rotation continues. The dorsal mesogastrium lengthens. The portion between spleen and dorsal midline swings to left and fuses with the peritoneum of the posterior abdominal wall. So the posterior leaf of the dorsal mesogastrium and the peritoneum along this line of fusion degenerate. The spleen, which remains intraperitoneal, is then connected to the body wall in the region of left kidney by a ligament called lienorenal ligament, and to the stomach by gastrorenal ligament or gastrosplenic ligament. The lengthening and fusion of the dorsal mesogastrium to the posterior body wall also determines the final position of the pancreas. So initially the organ grows into dorsal mesoduodenum, but eventually its tail extends into dorsal mesogastrium. So this tail will lie close to the spleen, close to the hilum of the spleen. You can see here. So when the stomach is being rotated, you can see a small pouch being developed behind the stomach, the omental bursa. So now here clearly you can see. So this was the stomach, this was the ventral mesogastrium, liver. So this is the lesser omentum and this is the falciform ligament. So this was the dorsal mesogastrium. So this is the posterior body wall, this is the stomach, and within the dorsal mesogastrium you can see the development of spleen. Then you can see the spleen moving towards the left side, and you can also see the rotation. There is a formation of the omental bursa behind the stomach. Lesser sac is located behind the stomach. So because this portion of the dorsal mesogastrium fuses with the dorsal body wall, the tail of the pancreas lies against the region. So once the posterior leaf of the dorsal mesogastrium and the peritoneum of the posterior body wall degenerate, along the line of fusion, the tail of the pancreas is covered by peritoneum on its anterior surface only. So therefore, it lies in retroperitoneal position. So organs such as pancreas that are originally covered by peritoneum but later fuse with the posterior body wall to become retroperitoneal are said to be secondary retroperitoneal. But whereas if you see kidney, those are primary retroperitoneal organs because from the beginning they lie behind the peritoneum. But here the pancreas, which was developed in the dorsal mesoduodenum, which was covered by peritoneum on both sides, now it has become retroperitoneal. So it is secondary retroperitoneal. As a result of rotation of stomach above its anteroposterior axis, the dorsal mesogastrium bulges down. It continues to grow down and forms a double-layered sac extending over the transverse colon and small intestinal loops like an apron, and this is the greater omentum. So its layers fuse to form a single sheet hanging from the greater curvature of stomach. The posterior layer of greater omentum also fuses with the mesentery of transverse colon. The lesser omentum and falciform ligament form from the ventral mesogastrium. So this ventral mesogastrium is derived from the septum transversum. So when liver cords grow into the septum, it tends to form the peritoneum of liver, falciform ligament and lesser omentum, which I have already shown in the diagram. Falciform ligament extends from liver to the ventral body wall. Lesser omentum extends from stomach and upper part of duodenum to the liver. The free margin of the falciform ligament will contain the umbilical vein, which is obliterated. This is the left umbilical vein, which will be obliterated afterward to form the round ligament of the liver, ligamentum teres hepatis. The free margin of the lesser omentum connecting the duodenum and liver contains the bile duct, portal vein, and hepatic artery. And this free margin also forms the roof of epiploic foramen of Winslow, which is the opening connecting the omental bursa. It is the lesser sac with the rest of the peritoneal cavity, the greater sac. You can see here, this is the stomach. You can see the spleen, and this is the rotation happening, and this is the initial stage of formation of omental bursa. Liver is moving to the right side. Now you can see this is the adult position where liver is completely on the right side, spleen is completely on the left side, and you can see the stomach. So this is the lesser sac, omental bursa behind the stomach. So here you can see the pancreas, which was intraperitoneal. Now it has become retroperitoneal. So this part of the peritoneum has disappeared. So kidneys were retroperitoneal from the beginning. So these are primary retroperitoneal, whereas pancreas, which was intraperitoneal, has become retroperitoneal due to developmental changes. So this is secondary retroperitoneal. So this is with the rotation of the gut. You can see here. So this is the omental bursa behind the stomach, and this is the greater omentum. You can see here, this is the completely grown up greater omentum covering the transverse colon. So developmental anomaly for the stomach will be the most commonest, the pyloric stenosis, where circular and some part of longitudinal musculature of stomach in the region of pylorus will hypertrophy. So one of the most common abnormalities in infants. So earlier it was developed during fetal life, but now they also say that it is presenting 3 to 5 days after birth due to treatment with some drugs like erythromycin. You can see here, this is the pyloric stenosis. So it is characterized by extreme narrowing of the pyloric lumen, and there will be severe projectile vomiting. So sometimes pylorus is atretic. So other stomach anomalies are very rare. Duodenum. The terminal part of the foregut and the cephalic part of the midgut form the duodenum. The junction of the two parts is directed distal to the origin of the liver bud. So as the stomach rotates, the duodenum takes the shape of C and it rotates to the right. The rotation, together with rapid growth of head of pancreas, swings the duodenum from its initial midline position to the right side. The duodenum and head of the pancreas press against the dorsal body wall, and the right surface of the dorsal mesodenum fuses with the adjacent peritoneum. So both layers subsequently disappear, and the duodenum and head of pancreas become fixed in retroperitoneal position. This is the thing what I have explained here. You can see here, pancreas becoming retroperitoneal along with the duodenum. So in this particular section, duodenum is not visible. The entire pancreas thus obtains a retroperitoneal position. The dorsal mesodenum disappears entirely except in the region of pylorus of the stomach, where a small portion of the duodenal cap retains its mesentery and remains intraperitoneal. So during the second month, the lumen of the duodenum is obliterated by proliferation of the cells in its walls. However, the lumen is recondylized shortly thereafter. So because the foregut is supplied by the celiac artery, the midgut is supplied by the supramesenteric artery, the duodenum is supplied by branches of both the arteries. You can see here is the solid stage, and this is recanalization of the duodenum. Spleen developed as lobulated masses from mesoderm of the upper part of the dorsal mesogastrium. We have seen in the earlier diagrams under cover of its left layer. Then lobulated masses fuse to form a single organ. So these lobulations will represent as notches of the upper part of the spleen. We can see in the dissected specimens. So when stomach rotates, spleen is pushed to the left side. Anterior part of the dorsal mesogastrium will form gastrosplenic ligament. Posterior part of the dorsal mesogastrium will form the lienorenal ligament. You can see here, this is the stomach, this is the liver in the ventral mesogastrium, this is the spleen in the dorsal mesogastrium. So this is the dorsal mesentery. You can see here, between the spleen and the stomach, it is forming gastrosplenic ligament. Between the spleen and the kidney, it is forming lienorenal ligament. So developmental anomalies will be the accessory spleen, which will be located around the spleen connected by fibrous threads, or in the gastrosplenic ligament, or in the greater omentum, or rarely in the left spermatic cord. Thank you.